Welcome to the series of how these renders were made. Today we are going to analyze this project made by Paw, a young man from Poland. He wanted to capture the beauty and vision of a place in paradise, and as with all projects, it is crucial to collect enough references both for inspiration and to have something to base his models and materials on. He looked for tropical beaches and rocky islands from around the world, and the reef that had to surround the island, and for that, he used photos as well as satellite images from Google Maps. And as for the references of the house, all photos and plans can be found on Arch Daily, where there are many projects to inspire you. When it comes to working with large projects, Blender does not like it. It would have to improve the RAM. To circumvent this, he divided the scene into smaller parts, a file for the house, another for the garden, and the largest, for the whole island. For complex projects, it can sometimes be a challenge to get started, and the best solution is to start with the simplest, in this case the house itself. Making architecture, especially contemporary and modern, is quite simple in Blender. He started by importing the floor plans as a background image and extruding a single plane to match the walls, then extruded them upwards and so on, until there is something that looks like the reference. I used Blender's Archipack plugin to generate a floor that I used as a wooden ceiling and cut to shape it using the Boolean modifier. Then, I used parts of that ceiling to make wooden walls. Remember, it's always good to reuse things in your projects to save time. Had to make two window models to more or less match the reference. Normal windows and railed windows, with elementary geometry with bevel, a pane of glass in the middle, and finally, add details. To make the pool water realistic in Blender, I used the dynamic paint modifier. For that you need two objects, a plane with the shape of your pool and an object that moves the water. In this case, that was the cube that acts as a waterfall, creating ripples from the corner of the pool. You set the water plane to canvas and the other object to brush. Then, you can animate the brush object by moving it up and down. And when you are satisfied with the result, simply apply the modifier to save it. He used two basic models, one plane for the ocean and the other the seabed and the island. For the modeling, he used Blender's sculpting tools, with dynamic topology turned on so he could see where to put more details and where not, and started sculpting. He also sculpted the bottom of the sea a bit to make sure there are variations in the color of the water. Finally, he got rid of the hard shapes with the soft brush, set his first camera angle, and gave a test rendering. For the rocks, he used models from Megaskins, which he duplicated and scaled to fit in the right places. For some modifications, he used the proportional editing tool that allowed him to mold the rocks into all the shapes he needed. He also put some rocks underwater. He needed some smaller rocks scattered around the sand to look like a reef, and for that, he used some smaller Megascan models and the scatter plugin, which quickly creates particle systems along with density and size maps. To create the reef, he used a satellite image, made it perfect in Photoshop, and extracted the height data with a blue filter. In a regular reef image, the depth of the blue goes along with the depth of the water, which can be used to make a reasonably accurate displacement map. He used it to create a variation of height below sea level, along with the color map, to give the feeling of a real-life reef. When working in an exterior, there is no escape from the vegetation. Most of the models are from Maxtree, but since they don't provide models for Blender yet, he had to make the materials himself using the maps that come with the models. When working with prefabricated assets, it's good to spend some time to make variations. The real world is too random, and the human eye will always notice repetition, and the larger the scene, the more varied your assets should be. Other models of trees and shrubs were made with the growfx 3D plugin. I distribute the vegetation using the scatter plugin. By duplicating the objects, I create instances, which reduce memory usage during rendering. Other models were placed by hand in the desired location. This was the most time-consuming part of the project, apart from rendering. For the garden, he used models with a higher polygon count. To avoid repeating the same palm tree trunk, he used some of the megaskin's trunks combined with the polygon bark texture. For the grass, I use grasswold models, as they are one of the most realistic that can be obtained. The plane of the grass has a displacement to make it irregular. It is a mix of difference and textures, using procedural noise controlled by color ramps, the REEF displacement mentioned before, and of course a wets and map. Most of the layers are created using gradient textures mixed through RGB mix nodes. To create some variation, he used the noise texture mixed with the gradient, using Mix RGB in color burn mode, which he also uses to modify the roughness of the sand, making it almost mirror-like where it is closer to the water. Blender has an ocean simulation modifier, which he used to create a couple of normal maps that he made seamless in Photoshop and then combined them using RGB mix nodes with noise texture to break the repetition. To replicate the clear water, he did it with the 3D software using volume absorption and added a volume dispersion node that he mixed with the previous one using the add shading node. Such a volume setting should also work well on any other body of water, such as pools, where he copied and pasted it. Finally, it is essential to give the object a real volume using the solidify modifier, or else it will not display correctly as we observe in this image. Using a polygon texture, he applied the map to a plane that he extruded a couple of times to match the shape of the coastline and lifted it slightly off the ground to cast some shadow on the sand. To create a more natural fade, he used a gradient texture mixed with the image map through Mix RGB set to burn color for a more organic effect. For the horizon line, he used an atmosphere shader a few dozen meters from sea level for a smoother transition. For the house, he used polygon materials and megaskins. He tried to give a specific shading to each object, even when it looks clean in the reference, just to give it that extra detail. Sometimes a simple rough or normal map can make a big difference and allow for more realistic close-ups. Dirt maps is one thing artists often forget. Sometimes clients don't want that, but adding them to exterior walls is easy in Blender. To do that, create an additional UV map. In the camera view, he defines which coordinates should be used as defaults. Then, he made a loop cut to define how much the leaks should be stretched. He then adjusted the UV map to match the texture and inverted the selection in edit mode to prevent other faces from using the map. These are the main HDRI maps I used, downloaded from Polygon. For the illumination, I link a sunlight that comes integrated in Blender to the sky image. The tool is called Sun Position and has a self-explanatory interface. Since there is already a sun in the HDRI, he needed to get rid of it and decided to use a JPG instead, since he will add the sky in Photoshop. To render all the images, he used Cycles, Blender's path tracing engine. The last step in each project is to make the images look even better than they already do. I don't use any post-production tools in Blender, so I bring all the raw renderings into Photoshop. We leave you with the final images, but first, if you found the video interesting, please like and subscribe to analyze more projects.
About